a storm, brewing up a storm, brewing up inside, and his eyes are wild and it can't go on. He's brewing up a storm.
Okay, good morning and welcome to Galway Politics Live. This morning we're in O'Reilly's Byrne kitchen. And first of all, I'm Mike Geraghty. I'd like to introduce my co-host, Niall Brolcháin.
Yeah, good morning, Mike. Right, we're joined today by 4 Galway City Councillors, and you're all very welcome to O'Reilly's Byrne, Salthill. We start with Owen Hanley of the Social Democrats, and Imelda Byrne of Fianna Fáil. And then we have Niall Murphy, again, who's a new councillor for the Green Party. And we have Hoare, who was elected in the last local elections on behalf of Fianna Gael. So I know they're all young, they're all ambitious, and they're, especially Imelda. Imelda's very young. And I'm very young as well, and so is Mike. We're all young. But they're
young at heart.
They're all new councillors, relatively new. I mean, to be honest with you, I have more experience than the whole lot of you put together. But nevertheless, you know, what Galway always needs is new blood, and we have people, you know, you've all been fairly active in your communities and societies over the years. So what we want to do is really hear about you first, I think.
Yeah, so maybe Owen, you might open up and tell us a bit about yourself.
Okay, that's the easy question.
That's the easy one.
Hi, my name is Owen Hanley. I'm a councillor for the City East Ward for the Social Democrats. I don't know what much more you want to know about myself, but I put it all on social media so you can find it there.
A little bit of background, I suppose, just before bringing them out. What did you do before you got elected?
Before I got elected, I actually came straight out of college, so I had finished my Masters in Human Rights Law. And there's not a whole lot of human rights law jobs in Galway, but I was adamant that I would stay in Galway. And I really wanted to contribute in some way, and so I got lucky in terms of the way that the timelines worked out. So I was able to, after I came out of college, I started working in retail, and that pretty much funded a local election campaign for me to run. And fortunately enough, I was successful in that and was elected by the East Ward of Galway. And since then, it's just been a year of being a councillor. It's been an interesting year, a challenging year at times, and now very much a different ball game than what we would have expected a year ago.
Imelda?
Yeah, I'm native Galwegian from inner city Galway. A graduate of NUI Galway, where I studied science and education, and qualified as a second level teacher. And I spent really all my life in education since then. I spent a very short period of time, teaching around the country, teaching science, and even at that stage I was really frustrated, I suppose, with the systems that the people that were, you know, most disadvantaged had to go through. And I moved on from there to come back to Galway, did a Masters in Occupational Health and Ergonomics, which specialised in health promotion. So I've always had a huge interest in that area as well. I moved from there into working with as well as the City of Galway VEC, where I was coordinator of ETA. So again, the path there in terms of working with people that were long-term unemployed, you know, started, I suppose, again, or added on to my passion around the opportunities that education can give to people in terms of them transforming their lives, their families' lives and their communities. So I then moved from there. The last 20 years I've spent heading up the Access Centre at NUI Galway, where we try to support all individuals that are underrepresented in terms of access to higher education, whether they're people with disabilities, mature students, financially disadvantaged, lone parents, travelling community, people in direct provision. And also that the model that we use is not only about the individual, it's about supporting the communities, whether it's the school community, the family community, where people live and so on, you know. So I ran for the local elections last year, along with yourself, Mike, and had a fantastic campaign, but was unsuccessful at the time. So with Ollie Crowe moving to the Shannon, I was co-opted and have spent the last 2 months attending meetings, you know, in Leisureland and learning an awful lot, I have to say. So
great history. Your aunt was the first female mayor in Galway, isn't that right?
Yeah, Mike. So I suppose I grew up surrounded by politics, but also I suppose the importance that I'm one of 11 children as well, you know, so it was a big family with my father died when I was very young. We you know, it was always about sharing and the importance of what we can do in the community. So there is a lifelong, I suppose, history there in terms of that interest in politics, but also I suppose on my mother's side, and my father was hugely involved in sport in Galway, and my mother's family in terms of GAA and hurling. So I suppose always the door was always open. We were always encouraged to do what we can to support people that didn't have the same opportunities as us, you know. So delighted to be here and see what I can add over the next few years, you know. So thanks, Mike.
Okay. Now you're not the new City Council.
I am, yeah. A little bit about myself. Well, so I work as a software engineer for Cisco, which is based in Owen, but I live around the corner from where we're sitting in Salthill. And I suppose in Cisco, the stuff we work on is messaging applications and video conferencing applications, kind of similar to the setup we have here today. So, you know, I always thought that was kind of a bit abstract from normal Galway living, but when everybody moved to work from home, suddenly the stuff we were doing became very, very relevant. So I'm now working from home myself, using the technology that we helped create at Cisco. In terms of my political position, so as you mentioned, I'm the Green Party councillor. So when Pauline O'Reilly got elected to the Senate, I was after a selection process within the Green Party, I was co-opted in to replace Pauline. So I canvassed for the Green Party for years. I canvassed for Niall Brolcháin here, and I canvassed for Pauline in her last outing in the local and general elections.
That shows you how long you've been around.
And it shows just how old I am, exactly. But this is my first time involved as an elected representative of the Greens. So it has been completely different from canvassing. When you canvass, you go out and you say, you have a manifesto or a general set of policies, and you say this is what the Greens believe in. And then you go into a council meeting, and there's a very specific issue, which is not necessarily a very green issue, and you have to be, you have to vote for or against it, and it's much trickier to have a position on, on whether we'll paint Blackrock diving board a different colour. It's hard to go from the general policies down to that. So I certainly found it an interesting challenge to find positions as a councillor as compared to the positions you have to present on the doorstep when you're canvassing, especially when you're just canvassing for the party or for another candidate, as I think from yourself. So that's been my experience so far, anyway.
That's great, thanks a lot.
Yeah, I think it's very important, Mike, that we have two co-optees on the council, and we have them both here today. And I think it's very important that the Galway public gets to know who they are. Would you agree?
Absolutely.
And I think it's great to have sort of fresh. I think good turnover and good fresh faces on the council.
And it's nice
it's
to
very
see
positive
the
thing.
two that are there for a year as well, because there's relatively new to it.
You're the experienced guy.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, we'll be the ones to be given out to.
So what about you, Eddie?
So Eddie Hoare, Fianna Gael councillor for Galway City Central. I was elected to Galway City Council in May 2019. I've been in the council for the last year. So I suppose my background, my history, grew up in Dangan. My education went to St Mary's College in Galway, was educated in NUI Galway, received a BCom, Masters in Accountancy, and for the last number of years have practiced in accountancy within Galway City, and now practicing with our family practice, Hoare Chartered Accountants. So that's my background from an educational, from a work point of view. I suppose my background with people would have been very closely aligned with sport in the city, very actively involved in the GAA.
You're very well known in the sporting field now. Don't be shy.
I would be, very actively involved within Galway GAA, within St Michael's GAA, a number of GAA clubs within Galway City. I suppose that always gave me the opportunity to interact and engage with people, with young people, with people of all ages and communities. My history in politics, I was actively involved in politics for a number of years. First canvassed with Pádraig McCormack a number of years ago, then Brian Walsh, who succeeded Pádraig in the Dáil seat in Galway West. Have also canvassed actively with Sean Kine and more recently Hildegard Naughton. I always had a big interest in politics, always followed politics, and it was always within our family. My mother came from Castlebar, her father was a classmate of Henry Kenny, who obviously is the father of Enda Kenny and was a former TD. So politics was always very front and centre of our house. We always had a firm interest in it. The opportunity came last March. It came late when Pádraig Keneally decided to retire from Galway politics. It was a late call up to the ticket, but a call up and an invitation that I happily welcomed, and set about approaching and a campaign and meeting as many people as I could and putting a face to people in my area. It was a very enjoyable campaign. I enjoy meeting people, interacting with people, be it sport, be it business, be it politics. And politics is very similar to what I do day to day. I interact with clients, I advise businesses, I advise individuals, and I give them advice and listen to them. And politics, I think, is important about listening, and that's one thing I suppose I've learned in the last year is we can all have our opinions, but ultimately I'm representing maybe 20,000 people in Galway City Central, but as a whole, as a bank of 18 councillors, we're representing 80,000 people. We have to listen, we have to engage, and one thing I have said when being elected is I hope to have an active presence on the ground. And my active presence on the ground is that I'm seen, I'm vocal, I have an email, I have a phone number, I have a WhatsApp, and I'm available at any time, during any day, during any week.
What are people saying to you right now? Like, what are people saying at the moment? I mean, you're saying you're listening. I mean, what are they saying?
Well, there's obviously grave concerns with regard to COVID-19 at the moment around Galway, around the city, and it's important that any concerns that are channeled to me as an elected representative, that I communicate them to the powers that be it the executive and Galway City Council, be it the various government bodies or the various government positions.
Is there anything like the specific that they're saying? I mean, what would your sense be as to how people are feeling right now, or what are the sort of issues that they're?
Well, like I mentioned,
and we put this to the other councillors as well, because I think before we get into our main topic.
Since being elected last May, I've been elected chair of the Transport SPC, and transport is a very, very big part of Galway. I think the traffic gridlock in Galway is important. I'm hearing from businesses, from clients, from individuals with regard to traffic gridlock. So what they're saying is, what can you do to improve the traffic in our city? We've €750 million ring fenced with regard to an outer city bypass. We've €250 million ring fenced for inner city, more sustainable urban transport methods. So what are they telling us? A lot of people are saying we need a bypass. It's curtailing, it's choking our city. I'm a young person, I'm in my early 30s. I'd be looking to purchase my own home. I'm hearing from people around Galway, around the city, that they're unable to afford their own home. So me as an elected representative, I've liaised with Owen Murphy, who's the former Minister for Housing. I'll be liaising with the new Minister for Housing, and I'll be liaising with my own party leader, Leo Varadkar, to ensure that there is tangible and proper rollout of affordable housing schemes in Galway. Those affordable housing schemes will give other people of my age ilk the opportunity to own their own home. We as an Irish population, the culture is people like to own their own homes. At the moment they can't afford to. As I said, the North West Regional Assembly recently issued a document with regard to calling our region a region in transition. We're the only region within the North West Regional Assembly where affordability exceeds 3.5%. So young couples cannot afford a home based on the criteria. So I'd be looking to push out the boundaries with regard to affordability, with regard to the bounds of the bandwidth of social housing, with regard to the bandwidth of affordable housing, and allow young couples to own their own homes. That in turn will alleviate the rental crisis, because those young couples are occupying rental properties. If there's a big demand for rental properties, the price will go up. It's simple economics, it's supply and demand. If we can alleviate and put those people into homes to servicing their mortgages, will free up rental properties, the price of rents will come down. And it's a very simple model that I'd like to drive as an elected representative, and anything in my power that I can do to put 1, 2 or 100 or 1,000 people into homes, I will do in the next 4 years. And that's one mantra I have followed all since I've been elected: affordable housing and housing for all.
Okay, now I'm going to put the same question to everybody in turn, if that's okay, Mike. Just, like what different people say different things to different councillors, and partly it's because of where they stand. So it's probably a bit of an unfair question to ask Niall and Imelda, in the sense that you've only been in there for a short period of time, but I mean, you're still talking to people, you're both active members in the community, and I'd be interested to know well, we'll start with Niall first. I mean, what are people saying to you?
So, I suppose, it's an interesting role being a new councillor and trying to figure out what your position is going to be. So at the beginning, I thought, okay, I need to listen to everybody possible from whatever areas or backgrounds or political beliefs or whatever, and at some point, I want to be able to say, right, and one of the first warnings I got when I became a councillor from somebody who had not another councillor, but somebody who worked with the city council, and he was saying, like, you need to pick a few things because you won't be able to take on everything. There'll be loads of different issues. If you try and take on everything, you'll get nowhere because you just pulled in all directions. So I'm still in a mode where I'm listening to absolutely everything and trying to figure out, okay, of all these different issues, where's the one, not necessarily the most important issue, but where's there an issue where I can actually make a difference?
But what's coming up with people?
What's coming up? So what's coming up? I'm not getting a lot of people saying, oh, COVID is a big deal, therefore, I'm not saying it's not a big deal. I'm saying
but
that's not what I'm hearing.
I'm
hearing specific issues. I heard an awful lot about cycling for Salthill, and that was many individuals contacting me through many, and some, when you get a huge amount of contact on something, you can say, is this a little bit orchestrated by pressure groups, which does happen, and a little bit of that happens with cycling, but a lot of them were individuals who had no connection with the cycling groups, but just felt they wanted a cycling lane. So that was one big issue, and I think. There's the other issue. This morning I was talking to people over in Kappa about the swimming pool development in Kappa, which impacts parking and there's environmental impacts on that park as well. And there's I've been talking to some people working in Galway Partnership about dealing with migrants and some asylum seeking issues. And as I'm going around, I'm sort of saying, well, one thing is I want to learn more about what's going on in Galway, because I need to know those things when more general votes come up in council. But I also want to figure out of those people, who can I help? And at the moment, the only help I really give is the only power I have is to find information. A lot of the time, those people don't know, when is the deadline for objecting to a certain planning application, or that kind of thing. And some of the information might actually be available if they knew where to look, but they have to know where to look, and not every citizen does. So I suppose I'm seeing a lot of different disparate little issues. And as I say, all politics is local. It's usually one specific place that's.
And like, how do you have the issues of traffic and housing come up much?
Well, the cycle lane is very much a traffic issue. Housing, apart from individuals and individual planning applications, nobody's talked to me about housing policy. In terms of national plans. I mean, as a councillor, we've all been presented with the plans for Dyke Road, plans for Sandy Road, and reference to Stord Arms, so that sort of thing.
About the public, is this a big issue facing the citizens out there in Galway, as opposed to the lobbyists and the individuals and the vested interests?
Well, I think housing is a very big issue, but I haven't been hearing it. Now, maybe I live on the west side of the city and it's slightly more affluent. I don't know, but that's not what people are contacting me about. So whether that's me, whether that's the Green Party, honestly,
that's important
I'm
to
not
know,
sure.
because quite often people can get bombarded, as you say. I mean, you've got maybe 100 cyclists coming at you. That's not necessarily the experience of Eddie here, or it's not necessarily the experience of Imelda.
Yeah.
It might be because you're a Green councillor, and that's who they that's the way it goes.
Yeah.
Could we move on to Imelda? I don't know. Could you do me the favour of moving the microphone down the? Sorry, this is a very as they call it, Heath Robinson way of thinking.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks, Niall. Well, I think, Niall, I've got to refer back to, I suppose, when I was canvassing last year, and very much on the ground, some of the things that I was asked about was in relation to what Eddie has spoken about as well, in relation to housing. Since I've been elected, I haven't got any communication about that. But I think it's important to know that I suppose Owen Murphy, the previous minister, I suppose really didn't spend much time in Galway. But I'm happy and committed and convinced that the current minister, who has made a commitment to come to Galway within the next few weeks, is very much committed to providing the funding in relation to affordable and social housing. I suppose on a more work-related stuff as well, in terms of what people are talking about, is the whole issue of returning to education, whether it's schools or higher education or whatever, and the whole issue of funding to relate. And again, I'm delighted with that the new government has a specific department in relation to higher and further education. And I can talk later about that, because I'm very excited, I think, about the developments within that area. I mean, like Niall has said, absolutely, I've had emails in relation to transport and gridlock, and a part of my campaign last year was the whole thing of having an integrated infrastructure in relation to transport around the city. So again, as Niall was saying, as a new councillor, what I'm learning is we're getting an awful lot of information. But we also what I'm also learning is about the rules. I've also got emails in relation to Kappa Road and all of that. But I mean, I do realise that information is presented, but there's policies and there's feasibilities and studies and constraint studies that have to be done. So, in my response, I suppose, to people that are coming near me, and they're not necessarily Niall either, are people that are in my own. It's a broader Galway issue than my own constituency. Is that that we have to go through these procedures and have the knowledge in order for us to be able to make a decision on that. So I suppose the other issue is in relation to the whole area of direct provision and all of that as well. And obviously, again, through my work, I meet that a lot, and also I'm hugely involved in I suppose the University of Sanctuary and the City of Sanctuary. And again, a part of my manifesto last year was ensuring that our city is inclusive in every way. So they are, I suppose, just some of the issues that I can actually respond to in the last 2 months, I suppose, when I've been there, Niall, But other than that, as to answer your question in relation to what people are asking me, really, they're the issues that I have come across.
Owen Hanley has been sitting there patiently,
Yeah.
listening to everybody there, and he's actually quite an experienced activist and very, vocal on social media and in the media generally, which is the topic we're going to come to in a minute. But we'd love to hear what people have been saying to you. You've been there a year. You've had plenty of time you've done a lot of canvassing for various different people, both in the general and the local election. So you must have a good handle on what people are saying.
Yeah, I suppose there is a difference between what people bring up canvassing versus what people bring up as a councillor. In my experience of being a councillor, the number one issue that I'm getting is housing related. Either people who don't understand the system, don't know how to get on the system, don't know if they're eligible for the system, or people who are within the system who don't understand the different options that are available to them, or if an option is presented to them by the council, they're not sure what the implications of it are fully. So that's the biggest thing that continuously comes, and it's probably because it's consistent, whereas other things might have peaks and valleys. That's always been a consistent issue. And I suppose it's a difficult one to get as a councillor, because on the one hand you feel very powerless because there is the terms of scheme of letting, and that those are the rules that apply to everybody equally. But not everybody has an equal experience of life of the housing system, so you want to be able to advocate on their behalf, but there is a very strict amount of rules there. And the second half of why it's so frustrating is because a lot of it is dictated by government policy. And obviously on a local level there's very little you can do about that, particularly on affordable housing. So that would be the primary issue. Transport, again, in particular in Galway, is a massive issue for councillors and public representatives, and continuously getting, I suppose I would get it from maybe a slightly different perspective. The vast majority of people who will contact me would be public transport users or cyclists. And particularly on the east side, when you look at the 409, it's the busiest bus route outside of Dublin in the country. So it's absolutely crucial for commuters, for people going to work, for people going to study or school, that 409 works. And now in the COVID world, where buses can't operate at peak capacity, there's a lot of concerns around what September means for those commuters, because from an equality perspective, those people can't just turn around and buy a car. And there's no proper safe cycling infrastructure on the Dublin bus corridor, on the Dudushka road properly. So a lot of those people would be concerned about how do they engage with the workforce, and will they be disenfranchised in a way. Another big issue I hear about is from artists in the community sector. I would hear about that normally, but locally, recently it's been particularly important around COVID. In Galway City Council, we froze the art grants at the start of the year. Many artists rely on that. I think Galway City Council is particularly bad when it comes to funding that relates to people's income. And relates to workers' rights. I think there's a disconnect there. They don't fully recognise that artist grants equal livelihood, equals people's ability to pay the rent and feed themselves. And so that's been something that I've been working through with artists. And another issue that would come up pretty frequently is on the issue of climate. And you can take a broad view of what climate means. Sometimes it's very localised, and sometimes it's the bigger issue. But I would have a lot of people coming to me in relation to how plans impact on environment, impact on air quality. You would think these things are kind of, these are often presented by the media as trivial things, or things that people don't actually connect to in their real lives. But you'd be surprised how often people view developments and view plans and view infrastructure through that lens. So there'd be a lot of environmental concerns that would be raised with me. So just an overview.
Eddie is anxious, sorry about the...
No, just one small brief point that I think is important and worth making with regard to the housing situation here in Ireland. And Imelda did mention that Owen Murphy hadn't been in Galway, and fine, Owen Murphy hadn't been in Galway, but we have to remember and put ourselves back 10 to 11, 12 years ago when the Fine Gael government took over from Fianna Fáil. Ultimately, the country was bankrupt. We'd no money, we'd no credit rating, we'd no builders. We couldn't build homes. Like, we had a country where ghost estates were all over the place. So there's nothing sexy about a photograph about ghost estates, and it's important to remember that. Like, Owen Murphy and Minister Paschal Donoghue did a lot of hard work in the background with regard to restoring our public finances. Like, as I said, we were bankrupt. The Troika were here. They've since gone home. We've restored our public finances. And fine, Darragh O'Brien might come down and open up some of the new homes, but they can't be built without money, and without restoring our public finances, that can't be done. And that has been done, and I might be biased to my views, but that has been done under the stewardship of the Fine Gael-led government.
Right, could I put to you a question that Derek Hamilton has texted in? He's watching the show at the moment. Hello, Derek, wherever you are. And he's basically said housing policy is to centralise housing development within the city. I don't know if you'd agree with that, but that sort of is quite an aspect of the government policy, and not to encourage more urban sprawl, which a ring road will encourage. And he's saying light rail would be a much greater solution to city gridlock, surely.
And the point is taken, and I somewhat disagree with the point that Derek makes, because like, we have the Dyke Road development, we have the Sandy Road, and they're going to be urban quarters that are going to be located. I do agree with urban living, and
well, I think he's talking about sort of further out, sprawl, as in the city reaching out into the countryside.
Reaching out, well, I suppose
and the ring road obviously would be going
look,
Tonnabrookie and out.
At the moment we are confined. There was obviously talk about an amalgamation of both councils, and that would be increasing the land bank within Galway City. Unfortunately, our hands as a local authority are tied, because most of our land bank is utilised, and anything that hasn't been utilised is sterilised because we're waiting on the ring road. Fine, there could be a conversation with regard to that, but that would need joint up thinking between both
surely
local
the planning
authorities.
applications that are going in at the moment are for places like
Well,
Duns
for
Island,
instance,
or the huge development in the Docklands.
Just to speak of the Derek's point as well with regard to the decentralising, Ardán is a good example whereby Galway County and Galway City can develop some urban location outside the Galway city centre. Again, there's a lot of important things that need to be done with regard to infrastructure. We don't have the water infrastructure by Irish Water to be able to build the homes that are there. And our city is at capacity.
Now, isn't it?
So, like, we're talking about building houses and Ardán and the development. We don't have the infrastructure, the capacity. Irish Water needs to put the infrastructure in place. So we need to, I suppose, start planning going forward. We've been told, and we all know, that our city is going to double in population to go to 160,000 by 2040. We need, at the moment, we have issues with housing. We need
Derek's
more housing.
Point valid. I mean, we need more housing, but everything which is in planning permission pretty much is about large-scale development within the city. Whereas there isn't a huge amount of planning.
But that will be a conversation with regard to the city development plan, and maybe some rezoning of different pockets outside of.
Well, with due respect, I mean, there's already a city development plan in place, and I mean, obviously, the short-term building of new houses has to come within planning permission. No matter what it says in the planning, the new plan. People are not going to wait.
Again, though, there needs to be,
plan,
and Derek will I'm sure agree, there needs to be a culture shift as well with regard to individuals, because we've planning applications that do go in at a lot of times, and some people will complain on one hand about housing, and then they'll be objecting on another side with regard to an environmental issue. So we can't eat out of both hands. So it's important that, like, I suppose there's a culture shift with regard to the way we look at properties and the way we look at developments. Strategic housing developments were a method of fast-tracking developments of 100 plus or 200 plus for students. That's going to be removed now out of the next programme for government. So we just need to look at a culture shift. But look, there is part of what his argument that I would agree with, but it will involve a lot of consultation and a shift in policy, really.
So we might bring Owen Hanley in on that.
Yeah, sorry, do the mic thing again.
Yeah, thank you. No worries. So I suppose I would agree largely with the point Derek was making there. Before Cork City expanded its boundaries in 2019, Galway was geographically bigger than Cork City because of how we've planned our city, which is low density and urban sprawl. And it's not conducive to transport, it's not conducive to sustainable communities. So it's not the approach we should be taking. And I think strategic housing developments are a panicked response to a panicked situation. I guess it's a positive that they're going to be phased out in the next couple of years, but what will happen in the next couple of years, it's not very clear. But housing is obviously a priority, and it needs to be a priority, but so is building sustainable communities. And I think, on the east side of the city in particular, we will see situations where lots of housing was put in, but the community response, the community supports weren't put in, and so we're putting those in retroactively, but those should be there from the get-go, and hopefully that's a positive that we can take from the situation. I'm not so certain by Councillor Hoare's reassurances that the last Minister for Housing got a grip of the situation. It seems in relation to housing, it seems over the last decade, things have gotten worse, continues to gotten worse, particularly in the west side of the country, where homelessness seems to be increasing exponentially compared to the rest of the country. And the new minister for housing speaks a big game. It's only been a month, so I try to give people the benefit of the doubt and give them some time. But I think the new government has gotten off to a shaky start. So hopefully we're actually able to see some progress in relation to housing, particularly affordable housing, which we have not been doing for a decade in Galway City Council.
Just quickly on that one, the new government has got off to a shaky start.
Yeah.
What makes you say that?
Well, I suppose, again, we try to give people the benefit of the doubt when there's a new government. But there was
been there very long now, in fairness.
Yes, which is why I think it's, there was a lot of goodwill by the general public following COVID.
Well, you're a one and only decent opposition person here now.
Yes.
The rest of them are all government representatives.
Oh, they're all sellouts,
so
yeah.
You're on your own.
Yeah.
We'll support you.
Yeah, no worries.
Myself and Mike will support you.
So, after COVID, I think there was a lot of goodwill from people towards the government, and it's reflected in the opinion polls. But over the past month, I think the frustration has completely flipped on people. We had a crisis in relation to a minister who was eventually sacked. We have the increases for the super junior ministers at 17,000, while we see a country like New Zealand where they were cutting the salaries of the executive, and this is people who are paid 10 times what I'm paid and 10 times what a lot of people are paid and don't need to see that sort of top up. We saw the election of Catherine Connolly as last Crown Corla, which is great news for the rest of us, but doesn't look great for the government. And I think there's been a lot of confusion about the Green List. And what implications that has on the transference of COVID. So I think there's been a lot of things in a very short period of time. Again, it's only been a month, but it's only been a month.
Yeah. Okay. I want to just talk to what you're being termed as the co-optees. And it's actually Owen's colleague Susan McGrady who's asking this question. But would you support live streaming? And this is the subject dear to my heart of council meetings, because many of the councils around the country have had live streaming for years. Roscommon have got a very good live streaming system in. When we're talking about local democracy, Galway was one of the earliest councils to look at live streaming, but it didn't adopt it because certain people didn't want it to be adopted. But what about you guys? What do you think? We'll talk to the new councillors first, if that's okay.
But as I've only been there, I suppose, 2 months, and I think it would be a good idea, Niall, to be honest. Yeah, I would.
You've nothing to hide?
No. I don't.
What about you?
Anyway.
I mean, generally, we're in favour of it. Though I think now, I'm not sure what the reasons were that Galway Council turned it down before, but I think there was
money.
Was the money? Okay.
Just money.
So I think
that was the outward reason. The other reasons were that one or two councillors didn't suit them to actually have live streaming because they tended to speak out of both sides of their mouths, as it were.
Well, so actually, I'll come back to speaking out of both sides of my mouth or people's mouths in a second. But that it does mean. I mean, when I go back to what I said earlier about councillors giving people information, sometimes when people come to me with queries, I can't fix the problem, but I can tell them what's going on. And a lot of the time, that's me saying, "Oh yeah, in the council meeting, we were presented with proposition X, and some of the councillors said X, and some of the councillors said Y because there was two different opinions." Being able to live stream the meetings would mean that people would have more immediate access to that information as to what issues were raised there. Sometimes just in terms of the facts and things that are presented, and sometimes knowing what positions people took on things. It is interesting that, and again, Imelda referred to learning the processes. One of the processes is the vote. And I was there at several meetings before I realised, oh my God, I better start writing down what way I voted. Because somebody will come back to me and say, no, you voted for or against thing X a year ago. And I won't even know because in the minutes
the minutes don't necessarily reflect
no, they reflect the numbers. So
not the individuals.
Not the individuals, unless there's a roll call vote, which is rare. A live stream would be the record, and people's questions and responses and all that would all be there on record. Which
one thing many councillors put to me in the past was that, my goodness, a hell of a lot more business was done when the public left the chamber and the media left the chamber. You know, that there was a completely different dynamic when there was media there
Less showboating.
to when it wasn't there. Yeah, but you know, is there a point to that? Is there a point that there should be some discussions without having an audience there? And maybe Eddie can quickly go.
Yeah, just on that, I have no issues with the media attending meetings, and I'm sure you don't either. We do have a lot of detailed discussions where the media aren't there, and that's at a strategic level. So as I said, I'm chair of the Transport SPC. We meet, there's no media generally at the Transport SPCs. We also meet as a corporate policy group, all chairs of all SPCs. So at that point we draft out and tease out a lot more policy based where the media wouldn't be there, and I think it's important. With regard to the government and a shaky start, I agree, it has been a shaky start, but like, I could on the other hand say that the ruling pact in Galway City Council have had a shaky start as well, and we're only a year in, and there's also
of course, and Owen Hanley
no,
is.
but they're a year in and there's difficulties, and it's the Galway public that lose out there with instability, and we've on one hand supporting someone from Ayr, and then on the other hand they're won't support someone, yet they're going to support them on a budgetary. So like, you're either in or you're out, and that is a shaky start in my opinion.
Now, when I tried to organise a pact many years ago with Fianna Gael, and I know it's the same still, they said policy, forget it, we're not discussing.
But I'm just saying, from a stability point of view, from Galway's point of view, we're giving out about a government, but yet locally some of, like Councillor Hanley there, he's involved and he wasn't happy with Councillor Larkin, and yet he'll support Councillor Larkin's financial pleas or request at budget time. And so like, look, that's a shaky start in my opinion. I think that the people of Galway are the ones that potentially could lose out there.
Yeah, Owen again has been waiting patiently, so we'll give you a chance to reply.
So I suppose first on transparency, I think a live streaming would be a welcome thing. Again, it was presented that the financing was prohibitive, but I brought this up when I was elected to the council on the procedures committee. We were floated with a number that seemed prohibitive, but I think we'll revisit that again, and it will be something I continue to bring up. I also brought up recording which way councillors vote on every vote in the procedures committee. And I suggested I would bring amendments to the standing orders to allow for that, but then COVID happened. But I will still intend to do that and follow that up too. And it would save me a lot of time doing my updates, which I do after every meeting. So it'd be great if I could just clip things and whatnot. In relation to the pact, I mean, I don't think we can compare the importance of the pact to the importance of government. To be perfectly honest, I think the pact is a poor bandage on local government. But we're doing the best we can. I voted with the pact. Me and Councillor Larkin both represent the east side, and we both want investment for the east side. So I don't really think there's going to be much disagreement on getting what's best for the local community there.
You were not in favour of Councillor Larkin being elected as mayor, even though you had previously agreed to it. What was that about?
I think pacts are made wrong. They're made very quickly, and they're made in haste. And so reflecting on a vote over a year is very different to reflecting on a vote over a week. And I suppose the current context did change. The conversation about racism became much stronger, and ultimately that's where I was coming from. And we spoke it. I mean, obviously there's confidentiality to the pact to a degree, so I will respect that. But we had long.
Isn't here to defend
yes,
himself,
absolutely.
So, I mean,
I don't.
You're not.
No, I'm not.
That he's somehow a racist, or
no, I wouldn't. But yeah. I would say that we have to. Being first citizen is a very important thing. I've seen up close how my cupboard has done it, and it's very important, and it reaches people in a very important way. And I think it was important that he continues his year that he didn't get to fully live out. But I suppose, the pact is as it is, and I think it's not. I would much rather a policy pact, to be perfectly honest. But I know from my speaking to Dublin, the Dublin pact isn't working. I don't think pacts work. I think it's a failure that's a consequence of local government not being local government. And you look at I think there are legitimate criticisms of how the pact is running, but I think it's the best pact makeup that represents Galway, and I still believe that. I believed that a year ago. I still believe that, and I think in the meantime, until we get directly elected mayors with executive function, until we get genuine local government reform, it's what we have.
And just with regard to, briefly with regard to Councillor Larkin as well, and with regard to the remarks, like Councillor Noel Larkin had clarified his remarks on Galway Bay FM on live on the air. Me personally, I know Councillor Larkin, I know his son, I know his family. Very decent man, good businessman in Galway, and I for one, as an elected representative, know quite well that Councillor Larkin is not a racist. He represents his area and the East Ward very well, and I just want to make sure that point is not lost, that I believe and I know that Councillor Larkin is not a racist. His comments were probably taken up incorrectly by some, and I think it's important that they were clarified. And while we potentially weren't supporting Councillor Larkin for the mayor election, the reason was because the instability within the pact and no reflection on the Commons.
Yeah, well, I mean, Fine Gael could have supported Councillor Larkin.
We had said basically
he would have got elected if he did.
He wouldn't have he wouldn't have the numbers wouldn't have ticked up. Just put that on record. Just on Councillor Larkin, a lot of what he has said is true. Some of the comments that he made and the terminology he used was wrong, and he acknowledged that. But I think him as a person, I don't think what he said he actually meant what he actually said, and I think
made that point well.
I'd have to put up on the point about the numbers not being there. To the pact. Could have elected Noel Larkin. The numbers were there, but the path, a different path was followed. But I think a couple of the points need to be made about the pact. I would agree with Owen's point that a pact about policy rather than just position was would have been a stronger pact and would have changed completely the dynamic of the negotiations because people aren't. And I think
why didn't the Greens do that with Councillor Hanley?
Or originally when after the election.
Yeah.
Well, I wasn't there at the time, and I'd rather not comment on it.
I can tell you that.
But
why didn't you do it?
Why didn't we do it? Well, I suppose the Greens and the Social Democrats, I think, would have been interested in doing such a thing, but we are 3 of 10, and so we wouldn't have the majority, and I don't think we have the majority on the most of our decisions, but we use what leverage we have to make the best decisions that we can within the pact. I would like to see, I would like to see a pact that is a policy pact. That's my position. But we didn't get a left wing or a progressive council elected, and I think it's important.
Yeah, but look, it's not just left wing. Niall, do you want to come back to that?
Well, I wanted to finish my point on the pact because the point was made here that Councillor Hoare said that they were going to vote against Noel Larkin because of instability in the pact. Mm-hmm. That instability didn't exist. Within the pact there was a lot of negotiations, a lot of meetings, a lot of discussion, and Owen was there obviously. But compared to the fairly savage stuff that was going on online, none of that really existed within the pact. We had differences of opinion and there was a lot of robust discussion, but while there were protests and there was online petitions and all sorts of things, that wasn't really reflected within the councillors who went together.
Why didn't you vote for Noel Larkin then?
He wasn't nominated. I didn't get an opportunity to vote for him.
Yeah.
Can I just add one point really quickly, is that the reason that the pact exists now with a megalomania of different views within it is because of how Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael have acted in the past. Some councillors have
you're blaming the opposition within City Council for the pact not hanging together.
What I'm saying is some councillors have been in the pact in the past and they have said that they have experienced bullying from the other parties. That's how pacts in the past have worked. I don't think bullying people into silence is stability. So we have disagreements, and it's good to have disagreements. I think that makes it better.
Imelda, I just want to get Imelda's been quite silent for a while. So I just want to give her
I haven't been a part of any of the discussions that went on in relation to what you've been talking about. And I also would agree with Owen that the way forward is around the pacts should be policy driven, but I suppose it's just with individuals and personalities or whatever within any pact that people are stronger than others or whatever. I don't know exactly what you're talking about, but I would hope going forward, that any type of behaviour like that would not be allowed to. And I personally would make that commitment within any pact that I'm in, that I certainly would stand up for what was right. I hope, So again, I don't know what exactly went on, but I hope that would stop.
Okay, I want to finish this particular topic, but Eddie, just last word to you.
Just briefly, and a lot of what Owen said is right. I think policy-based pact would be probably more beneficial for Galway, and that's probably what the Fine Gael and the Fianna Fáil parties were initially trying to do, to try and sometimes it's easier to channel policy through when you have smaller groupings. So we were saying maybe a 3 parties. So for instance, if the Greens, the Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil were to form a pact, that's 3 policy groupings with a programme for government, a lot less, I suppose, parts of the pact. I think there'd be more stability. That's my opinion, and of course it would be, because that's Fine Gael would be in that pact.
Okay.
But I do agree, definitely a policy based, rather than just coming to a budget table and I want 20,000 for this, I want 20,000 for that. And the bigger picture of Galway, maybe 200,000 for a bigger project will leave a bigger legacy and ultimately a better legacy for Galway.
Yeah. So we have a wonderful thing here in we have consensus in Galway Politics Live here today, because all of the 4 councillors here have agreed that a policy pact is the way forward. So hopefully that's what we'll see next time around.
Well, we have
So-
to.
Exactly.
And then you have your jobs, your SDCs, your mayors, your
Yeah.
So-
But again,
puts
as
policy sometimes
I
to
suppose
the
that again,
front.
speaking from inexperience in terms of my exposure to the how things work. Do you know, I totally.
worked, maybe.
Yeah. Again, I suppose I'm trying to be
You
forward
don't have to
looking.
get stuck in the past, do you?
Yeah. So I mean, I agree totally with what Eddie is saying. I think it would be great if we could, have a parallel type of situation here in Galway where the government parties are working together locally. The policy-driven pact. I know that's very aspirational and ambitious, but I think if that's something that we
Sure,
could
that's
do,
what politics is all about,
Yeah.
for God's sake.
being
You know,
ambitious.
Being ambitious and being
Yeah.
driven and
Yeah.
putting forward policy.
I can
Yeah,
leave the room
yeah.
and they can sort the pact out. So if they want.
You have to ring Declan.
But I suppose again, Niall, coming back to, I suppose, but with myself and Niall being new here, and obviously Eddie and Owen are quite new as well. That it's an exciting time to be involved, in the work of politics here locally and nationally. So.
Good. So let's on that note, let's get on to. Sorry, Mike, you want to?
Facebook, yeah, we get a lot of Facebook traction this morning, and there's one going back to housing from Councillor Alan Chambers. I was reading out to you. We need proper infrastructure in place for any large-scale housing developments. We can't repeat what happened in Dundee. Money for the community, we wouldn't build a school or a resource centre. What do you think of that, Matt?
Well, actually, can we went first to the earlier point about housing? I think it's important to clarify one thing that Councillor Hoare brought up about the fact that we need the infrastructure to build more housing. And you mentioned Ardán and you mentioned the N6, and I just want to point, and that was originally a comment from, I think Declan was the name of the guy who mentioned it.
Yeah.
But
There's
there's a very important distinction there. The N6 will open up land out sort of Byrne direction for more housing, which will be more sprawl, whereas Ardán, which does not require the N6, is a more concentrated development which increases densities and allows the city to grow without as much sprawl and without the encouragement of one-off housing, which has got its own planning problems. I just felt I had to come back to that one because you did make reference to.
And
I don't want to broaden this too much now because we've been through this. I mean, the main topic that we had today was whether the media is trivialising Galway politics. So I want to move on to that question. And in particular reference, one of in my time in politics or my time watching politics, one of the worst examples of that I remember is Michael J. Crowe. A big headline said, "I am not an idiot," says Crowe, who is still sick of some trees. So the Advertiser had this series of articles where they highlighted some off-the-cuff comments by Michael Crowe in a council meeting, and it became known as the Crow who hates trees situation. So, they had these big headlines in terms of the Crow who hates trees. And there was a lot of other very important things being discussed at that particular point in time. And I want to just refer to I'll read out another point that they made, that in support of his view that some trees are causing difficulties for residents in the city, and defended himself against charges that he is the reincarnation of Oliver Cromwell or an idiot. And these sort of things are thrown about in the media, and it's all very good fun, but it just doesn't trivialise politics. And we have a well-known column called Bradley Bites, which I want to read out a few of the headlines, recent headlines. There's one here for Councillor Owen Hanley nominates himself for a Mayor's Award. So there he is, he can answer that himself. City Council tries to recoup cost of Mayor's New York City flights. Then there's a eulogization of Hildegard Naughton. Underdog Hildegard is a force to be reckoned with. The Galway Greens, there was an article about saving Private Ryan, which was all about Councillor Murphy here. And the Galway tent is dead. Long live the Galway tent. Aren't there enough chancers up in City Hall already, Owen? That was
I get a lot of attention. Yeah.
He seems to have a bit of a grow for you, Owen.
Yeah.
He's also mentioned, I think, Mike, something about Galway Politics Live, and it is an interesting column. Now, it's looking. It is what it is. It's a Miriam Lord style column from the Irish Times. It's looking at the personality aspect of politics. And the final point I wanted to make is, I'll come back to another point on this. But just really, I'll put it to the councillors here, and maybe again we'll start with Imelda. Just your views on, is there an element of Galway politics being trivialised? And it's all about the personalities and about the razzmatazz, and it's not necessarily about the serious issues such as Eddie was raising, like housing, health, or indeed even about cycling or about, any of the issues that the council actually has any control over.
Well, I suppose you've referred specifically to Bradley Bikes there as an example. Do you know what I mean? And I suppose certainly I think that definitely is personality driven. It has nothing got to do with what we're doing what we're working at, I suppose, around the table. So in that context, yes, I do think it is trivialising what's happening. And a more broader issue, I suppose, the local papers would also report on information in relation to what's happening in City Hall. But I would like to think that that the media going forward, would focus more on what's actually been achieved rather than it being around just the examples you gave there about people's off-the-cuff comments being a headline rather than more important issues. So.
Yeah, and I remember a 6-hour council meeting that I was actually chairing, and there was a 5-minute row at the end of it.
And that's all.
The next day, we're all about the 5-minute row and not about the 6 hours of business which was covered at all.
Yeah.
Anyway, Owen, there was a few. You seem to be a good target because also in the Advertiser, the Insider column is another one that looks at politics. Now that's written by different politicians. Mm-hmm. So in fairness, but sometimes perhaps it trivialises some things. And they say Insider spends endless hours each week sitting in the traffic, and he finds it hard to believe the people of Galway, particularly those voting in the city, are so indulgent of popular candidates and those on the loony left.
I think we should preface this conversation by saying local journalism is important, and it's good to have that sort of focus and attention. I know, if you're in Dublin, you're in Dublin City Council, you're competing with national media, it's not the same. Things get past that you don't notice, or things get simplified. So it's good we have that lens, and even a political column, it's good that attention, because personalities do matter. I might disagree with, say, Fianna Fáil, but I would have a lot of respect for Imelda Byrne. So the personalities who make up the council do matter a lot. I in certain columns, in certain papers, I do seem to get more attention. I think Eddie also gets a bit more attention. Who knows why? For instance, with the mayor vote thing, I inputted a form wrong, which is apparently worthy of an article when I was attempting to nominate Galway Pride. It's my understanding. I assume I did not get the nomination off of one nomination, but you never know. But that sort of thing isn't worthy of an article, in my opinion, and has a mental health cost. It just brings me anxiety, and it's kind of unnecessary. And
a bit of social media comment as well.
It's a bit mean-spirited, and if it's continuous, it has an impact on my livelihood because it impacts how I can work as a councillor with the community. It impacts how I get elected or whatever. It has an impact. So it's not just words in the wind. I think the Insider column I think is interesting because it's anonymous, but the writers usually have a point of view, and it's usually quite obvious what the point of view is. But it's anonymous, and I think not everybody knows it's by different people. I think some people think there is somebody within the Advertiser who is the Insider, who is this kind of political guru who writes these things.
Did you ever write one?
No, I've never written one. I've never been asked. But
Colonel Andrews, if you're listening.
But local journalism does matter, but what we do in council does matter, and as Imelda says, it becomes more focused on personalities. For instance, for the entire month of June, the focus was on the mayor vote. But we were doing, in my opinion, far, far more important things throughout the month of June, both for journalism's sakes and for maybe from a community activist point of view. And that should have been given more attention, and it wasn't. And it's unfortunate that it wasn't, and that happens every year when there's a mayor vote. So I think more attention can be made, because it's important. We make decisions that can impact for decades. And councillors make better decisions when there's more input, when the public is more engaged. So, again, the journalism is good to have, but it needs to be more focused, I think, on the nuts and bolts of local democracy.
Yeah, what do you think, Mike? You ran for election yourself, and so did I. So, do you have any sort of views on that? Well, and I know the hosts aren't supposed to be giving our own views too much, but did you find that as when you were running as a councillor that for the council that there were a certain element of trivialising or not really supporting?
Well, there is definitely, and there's probably a lot of favouritism, I think, with some of the articles that come out. Having written cut lines for Insider myself over the years, you do get a chance to put out your policies and stuff. But definitely, the local press can be very hard on candidates, and I suppose it's easy, to throw stones from a glass house. So I would tend to agree a lot with what Owen said there.
Let's put that to our other participants here.
Yeah, so the Saving Private Ryan was an interesting one, and fair play to Bradley's Bites. It called me out as a name and Ryan supporter at a time when I wasn't declaring to anyone who I was supporting, because I didn't want the leadership vote within the Greens to distract from the programme for government, which at the time was still going on. And once the programme for government was settled, I declared that I was supporting Eamon Ryan. So Bradley's Bites called it right there, so he was accurate. But in terms of trivia,
so you're not going to have a Johnny Depp style defamation case against.
But my second point is on who was going to be leader of the Greens. It was a reasonably substantial political issue, so it wasn't. I don't think it's trivialising politics to discuss who will and won't vote for the leader. But I'm not sure it was the same column or one a week later. I had become a councillor. But my use of Twitter was very minimal before I became councillor. And then I became a councillor, I said, oh my God, I have to have a Twitter account and I have to have an ambition of having 1 million followers by Christmas. And I changed mine because there are other people called Niall Murphy on the world of Twitter. I changed it to Councillor Niall Murphy. And Darragh Bradley was very quick to point out that it had been said by others within the council that I had changed my name to Councillor Niall Murphy, and I actually did it a number of days before technically, officially, I was a councillor. I mean, I'd been voting by the Greens, it was a formality, but that kind of stuff, you go, really, it's kind of entertaining, but is that what you want to consider political discourse?
And just in relation to that, he said, and I didn't bother.
Oh, exactly. Imelda had committed the opposite crime of not changing her Twitter handle. I realised then that you definitely, while some substantial issues will get talked about in the media, you'll definitely get a little bit of pettiness here and there.
So listen, Eddie, have you been given reasonable right by the media, or do you feel that there's been, some unfairness there?
It's an interesting point, and it's interesting to hear the views of the other councillors here on the display. Personally, I think the media channel the information quite accurately. I think, in fairness, we have Keith Finnegan, Galway FM, who has a current affairs show for 15 hours Monday to Friday, and a lot of that form, the basis of that discussion is politically driven. I think they channel the information quite well. The paper's point of view as well, I think the advertiser, you have Declan Barry, Kiernan Andrews, Matt Cassidy, they try to channel as best as possible the information that's in the meetings. Go back to the Tribune and obviously you have your Enda Cunningham, you have your Stephen Corrigan, Darragh Bradley, and the various the Frank Farrer, and they're basically in a meeting, and their objective probably is fine to inform the public with regard to what's going on, but they're also there to they have a job and they have to sell papers, and sometimes people like the particular headline.
Keith Finnegan once said to me, that the public loves a good row, and he's absolutely right about that. I mean, is that not the truth of the matter? That
they do.
The public, it's not the media. The media is there, as you say, to sell papers, and they're there to popularise things and to get people to listen to them.
Yeah, and just I suppose going back to the Bradley Bites, it's important to re-emphasise that it's one page within the publication every week, and I have been in Bradley Bites quite a bit, as Owen said, and I often go to the page and I say, what has he this week? And he gets me some weeks and I say, how did he know that? Or where did he get this information? I said, you got me there, Darragh. And then there's other weeks, there's other councillors, and I'll say, it's their turn today, and I enjoy it. Personally, I think it's tongue in cheek. I wouldn't take it.
Do you think it's balanced?
I wouldn't take
because,
it personally.
I was looking through it, and I noticed actually that there tends to be, like, there was a great eulogisation of Hildegard Nocton recently in Bradley Bites, whereas some councillors, maybe Councillor Hanley, I haven't seen too much about him that's kind of complimentary. Whereas, I'm not sure that necessarily the balance is entirely there.
It's not particularly, it's based primarily on politicians, the article is, but I think it is tongue-in-cheek. It's sort of putting a different twist on your typical journalism with regard to the meeting, and that's basically what it is in my eyes. I personally enjoy it. Sometimes it would annoy you, sometimes you just look at it and that's what it is. I wouldn't take it too seriously. I think by virtue of the type of article that it is and the type of column it is, it doesn't necessarily need to have a political balance. It's more tongue in cheek, and I think if people are basing their political views on a column that is tongue in cheek, it's not correct as the other articles, I think, and the more factual communication of meetings that I think people would form their judgments on. That's just myself, my own personality. Yeah. I think it's I enjoy it, to be honest, and as I said, there's times you do and times you don't, but I just take it. But like, it's interesting to hear Owen's point of view.
I suppose maybe more generally on the media. Again, it's very good that the media are there, that we have a local media there to dedicate their time to city council decisions. I suppose though it does impact you. I would say though we had a lot of meetings during COVID that weren't covered by the media, and there was still speeches. So I'm not so sure we'd remove the media and suddenly be a very efficient group of people. We all have our own biases and the own things we kind of repeat and say over and over again. But I know with the media there that, you know, when you're speaking, you kind of know if you're saying something that's quotable or not. And I say a lot of things that I know aren't quotable, because when we're dealing with an agenda item, when we're dealing with an issue, I like to ask questions that are quite detailed, and they're never going to quote those questions or those points, and that's fine. But it is something on a personal level that you're just constantly aware of. And I think another thing about maybe the Bradley bite, for example, was there are some things there that just aren't true, and I don't know if that's fully communicated. For example, the quotes for Niall Murphy around councillors changing their tag, I'm fairly certain that's not true, and there's a lot of quotes in there. I don't know where those quotes come from. And
well, they are true.
They are true?
They are true. Well, it was said by councillors before. It was the councillors who were being frivolous, not the...
Okay.
Darrell Bradley, he was just quoting him.
Okay.
I got it right. So in general, Darrell Bradley seems to be very accurate.
Okay. Well, there was something recently about the idea that I would step down from my council seat and give it to Niall O'Toole, which to me is kind of insulting because I worked for 6 months. And
that's not actually accurate, is it?
It's never accurate. And I emptied my bank account, and I am there to represent the people of the east side of Galway. I would never just step down and let somebody take my seat.
Will you run in the general next time?
Give me 10 grand.
Speaking of 10 grand, we're coming to time. Okay. We're coming to time now, but I just want to focus on one other issue, and the final issue, and just get everybody a little bit of a question. There was an article recently saying Hildegard Naughton is to get a hefty allowance on top of 124,000 salary. So the super junior ministers are getting a pay rise in the time of COVID of 16,000. But there's also a lot of articles about councillors, that if the Green councillors, the Fianna Fáil councillors and the Fine Gael councillors voted for the programme for government, that all councillors would get a pay rise of 8,000. So, you know, is the perception of that is very, very bad. Let's be honest about that. But is it fair?
Can I, as the opposition councillor,
let's actually go from top to bottom?
Yeah. First, I think the top up for the super junior ministers is wrong, and it looks bad, and it's not the right time for that. In relation to councillors, an independent Moorhead report was launched, investigating the work and the pay that councillors get. That report represented conclusions which included that councillors deserve more pay. It's probably not the right environment right now, but the programme for government, I think, says it would probably do it in the next 12 months. I don't think it's fair to say councillors were bribed or anything along those lines. Voting for a programme for government is a very big deal, and you have constituents to represent. So I don't think you would do that on the guise of a top up. So, you know, I might disagree with councillors, but I have a lot of respect for a lot of them.
So
I don't think they would do that.
You're justifying basically councillors getting a top up, but not the likes of Hildegard Naughton or perhaps Catherine Conway.
I don't think anyone who's getting over 100,000 deserves a pay rise. That's my personal view. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And just to be clear, what councillors are getting at the moment is roughly about 17,000 in pay plus a certain amount of expenses, and we're talking about an 8,000 increase, which is basically a 30% increase in the time of COVID. Mm-hmm. You know, you think that's okay?
Well, the report was made before COVID.
No, whatever about the report, do you think that's okay?
Not during COVID, no. But after. Councillors do a lot of work, and if we don't pay them properly, then we only allow privileged people to be councillors, and that's not right. Because like from my own perspective, I'm a full-time councillor because when I became a councillor, I didn't have another job, and it's very difficult to get into the labour force after you become a councillor because you can't ask a prospective employer to move their timetable around something that is very inconsistent beforehand.
Yeah, I can vouch for that.
Yeah, so I think we need, and there are other aspects. We see a lot of women who can't remain as councillors or can't run as councillors because they're not getting the proper supports. So I think councillors do need more supports, and especially they need more supports than ministers on 100,000.
Okay, Imelda?
Yeah, I think it's really unfortunate and really not good for the government that this has happened. So I in terms of the increase, unfortunately. So I especially in this time of crisis when people are really struggling. So I do have difficulty with that.
Catherine Connolly recently got appointed as Latvian Curler.
And an increase of
30,000
I know.
plus
I mean, I have to speak. It's fantastic. To see a woman in that position. So I don't know. Absolutely, and I wish Catherine every success with it. Again, coming in when I've been co-opted, and as Ona said, that Moorhead report has decided that this was the increase that was allowed. Again, I think that it's not something I suppose that I personally would agree with for myself. But I do agree that what Owen has said, there are a lot of people out there that would be stopped from participating in local politics and have an awful lot to offer if they weren't supported.
So would you turn it down if it was offered to you?
Possibly, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
I'm not thinking out of kilter with my understanding of the Moorhead report because certainly many councillors in the country are totally against the Moorhead report because councillors end up with less money. So the headline, they get an extra 8,000. Now again, I could have this all wrong because I haven't gone through the details myself. And at the time I saw the headline, I was a councillor and I had no idea what councillors were paid. So I was trying to figure out, does this mean I get extra money? Yeah. And my understanding now is the councillors in general are against the Moorhead report because they will get less money. But
how do they get less money?
So,
Eddie, maybe more details.
It's agreed, and you just took my point. They are, and again, we're talking about trivialising. We potentially are trivialising this situation because councillors could potentially end up with less money. The reason being, we at the moment have a taxable gross salary for the council of 17,000. Now, a lot of us are working and potentially would have other jobs as well. So a lot of that income that you would be receiving will be taxed 40%, maybe 50% with USC and PRSI. So you top it up by 8,000. Most of us will only receive potentially 4,000 of that. The tax,
that's still an increase.
The Exchequer will receive 4,000. On the other hand, we've unvouched expenses are for meetings allowances, which are allowances and they're not taxable. So the 4,000 meetings allowance and that we will receive for meetings and subsistence and various different things, 4,000 is paid to us on a quarterly basis, 1.5 or whatever on a quarterly basis, 1,250. 1,250 goes into our accounts on a quarterly basis. So there's no tax on that. So in effect, Niall is right. We will not be a lot of councillors. It's going to be on a vouch basis per the recommendations of the Moorhead report. So a lot of councillors do work, have a second job and raising families and have a lot of other commitments, and probably in a way I would say if you were a full-time councillor and you had a family and trying to service a mortgage, it wouldn't be possible because at 17,000 it's a very low. We're actually quite underpaid for what we do if you churn out the number of hours that we do to the gross salary, and that is an important point that's worth making. And while the headline will say we have 8,000 more of a salary, we're contributing, a lot of us will, 4,000 to the Exchequer, which will be used in turn to fund services to basically will be on an income line in Pascal Donoghue's budget when he's churning out the expenditures, and that is important, and an important point to make with regard to it.
I think we could allow this to run and run, and I hate to end it on this note, but I want to give the final word to Mike, if that's okay, just to wrap up, because in fairness, we've had a good debate here today, good wide-ranging debate. And thank you very much, all of you, for doing that.
Very much,
and we'll invite you for a cup of tea in a minute if you can spare the time. But final word to Mike.
Excellent. Well, again, to reiterate what Neil said, thank you all very much for coming. It's been very, very good. Owen, Imelda, Niall and Eddie. And it's been very handy with the experience of Neil as well, to have been in there as mayor and a councillor and a senator. So I think it's been very, very good. Again, thanks very, very much. And I'd like to thank O'Reilly's Bar and Kitchen for hosting it, Anthony O'Reilly and family. And we'll see you all again in 3 weeks' time. Over to you, Niall.
Thank you.
Thanks.
No, that's
Thanks
it.
very
That's
much.
it. And
Thank
I just
you.
say, have a good Sunday, everybody.
Thank